Good morning. This is the conclusion of my series on the day Stevie died. It's not really a conclusion because the case is still ongoing and Stevie's mom continues to look for justice and to know exactly what happened on September 4th, 2018, when she got the call that her son was dead from a gunshot wound in the presence of his girlfriend and her family members in their home. But Stevie died intestate. And if you die intestate, that means without a will. And in Pennsylvania, there is a line of succession when an unmarried person dies without a will. The parents are usually next of kin automatically. However, it's not as easy as just showing up and saying, I'm his mom, here's his death certificate, I get everything. Now, let me just make this very, very clear. Stevie didn't have a ton of money. Stevie didn't live in his own house. He lived with his girlfriend, as we told you on the first show, and her family. So this is not about money. But in many cases, it could be. And this is why Stevie's mom wanted me to do this show as well, is to help you guys before it's too late, before you have to go through the nightmare that she has been going through since September 4th of this year and continues to go through. I have talked often about my mother's death. Unexpected, completely unexpected, and yet prepared for. The just in case. My mother did not have a chronic illness. She wasn't sick. She wasn't even on any prescription drugs. But she had a really rotten uterus and an abdominal hernia that needed to come out. And she knew she was going in for surgery. And even before that, though, she had made plans. And those plans made my life so much easier than what Stevie's mom is going through and what any of you will go through. If someone you love, that you are actually legally next of kin, well, see, now you got to prove it. It's really difficult. You have to hire attorneys. I never paid one legal bill when my mom died. Not one legal bill. I didn't need a lawyer. Because my mother had prepared. And she gave me so many last gifts after her death. In Pennsylvania, line of succession does go by parents. But what you have to do and what Stevie's mom has had to do, and if anybody out there watches this show and says that Stevie's mom was given bad advice or told to do something she technically didn't have to do, I want you to let me know, because this is what she was told. Okay? She was told she needed a lawyer. That's legal bills. And again, Stevie had no money. He didn't have thousands of dollars laying around or money in the bank. That's why he was living with his girlfriend and her family, to save money. So she was told she had to get a lawyer. Then she was told that she had to post his death notice in a special portion of the newspaper. Now, I know that they used to do this in the newspaper, but when people read newspapers, now it's probably online. But anyway, she had to post it. And when she did that, anybody who saw that post could come in and contest her right to be next of kin for her son. Anybody could do it. Anybody could come in and say, oh, he told me when we were out for a beer one night that I get his stuff, or I'm next of kin, or I'm his beneficiary. Now, it's probably going to be proven false, but again, she's got to prove that. Stevie's mom has to fight that in court. Now, luckily, that didn't happen. And she is considered next of kin. But once again, she can't get his medical records because of HIPAA, even as next of kin. And once again, that's because Stevie didn't have a will and he didn't have power of attorney designate. This is something that's so important. And I know a lot of you out there are saying this is such an awful topic. We don't want to talk to our kids about this. You know what? You need to. You really need to talk to your children, your adult children, that they should have a will, they should have a power of attorney, and they should even have a small life insurance policy. Because as we saw yesterday, Stevie's mom didn't have $12,000 laying around to pay for her 27-year-old son's funeral, and the funeral homes are not in the charity business. They're in the greed business. They're in the money business. You don't pay, your child doesn't get buried. Period. I was so fortunate that my mother knew she was going in for surgery, and maybe there was some kind of weird feeling she had she didn't share with me, but the week before she went for surgery, first of all, years before, and any of you can do this today, this is what you can do right now today. Go to the bank and put a beneficiary on your checking and savings account. My mother did it years before her death. And she put me as beneficiary. Now that's important. It doesn't mean that the person you list can walk into the bank and empty it out. This only applies when the account holder, dies. And then that beneficiary can walk into the bank, and within 10 minutes, all I had to do the day after my mother died was walk into her bank, hand the death certificate, my ID. Yes, for those of you who don't like having photo ID, you do need ID for this. And within 10 minutes, her bank accounts were in my name. No questions asked. My mother did something else the week before she died, because remember I talk about inheritance taxes and how unfair they are. And my mother worked her entire life for the federal government, the Social Security Administration. And she didn't work every day at a job she hated for 45 years so that the federal government, or her estate didn't qualify, believe me, for federal inheritance tax. But she didn't think the government deserved her money. She worked for it. The government didn't. Why should they get 4.5%? Back then it was 4.5%. I was just reading online today, I think it has been upped in Pennsylvania to 6%. Government's going to come in, take 6% of everything that your parents or your loved ones worked hard so that you could inherit. Government gets their cut, unless you're smart. The week before my mother went into the hospital, supposed to be a routine surgery, but she did a few things that I consider her last gifts to me. First of all, we were planning our wedding at this time. It was supposed to be October of that year, which of course didn't happen. But she took a check out of her checkbook and she wrote it out to me. And she wrote in the memo, wedding plans. She signed it and she left the amount blank. But it was dated before her death. This was a really big gift. Because what it meant was, before her death was even announced in the newspaper, I wrote in an amount, not an amount that was enough to trigger any alerts with the tax people, but I wrote an amount into that check. And the amount that I wrote was not estate taxable. Okay? Smart. The other thing she did, because someone was going to be staying at her house taking care of her dog while she was in the hospital that she did not trust. She trusted them to care for the dog, but this person had a history of stealing, of mental illness, and she wasn't comfortable. So she brought me the very few pieces of valuable jewelry that she owned, and she brought it to me, to my house. And the second that that jewelry came into my house, it was mine. Not taxable, didn't have to report it, didn't have to tell anybody I even had it. That was smart. And it saved me a lot of headaches, and it saved me money. Because after all, this might sound like, oh, this greedy bitch daughter wanted money, money, money. No, see, this beloved daughter of her beloved mother, we both didn't think that the government had a right to take the money that my mother worked her ass off for 45 years for themselves. My mother always paid her taxes. My mother always paid sales tax when she bought something. Why should me, her daughter, have to pay taxes on all the stuff she already paid taxes on? She paid taxes on the money that bought those things, and then she paid sales tax when she bought them. Why should I have to pay taxes now? The other thing I want to tell you, my mother had 2 life insurance policies. Okay? They are not inheritance taxable. That's why life insurance is so great. And this is what you never do if you can get away with it. Never pay a deceased person's final expenses with life insurance. Life insurance is not taxable to anybody. What you do is you take their money, if there's money in their bank account, and you pay their final expenses, their credit card bills, their funeral expenses with that money. And you keep your receipts, and you do have to file a thing and send it, but you don't pay taxes on that money, as long as it's used to pay their final expenses. So there's some advice. Here's why power of attorney is important. If Stevie had had a power of attorney and his mother was designated, that means that the second that Stevie left this earth, his mother could act for him. Meaning she could have walked into his doctor's office and demanded his medical records, regardless of HIPAA. If Stevie had been in a vegetative state after his injury, his mother could have gone in and said, you know, Stevie had this in his power of attorney. He didn't want to live like this. We're pulling the plug. And nobody could have fought her. Do you all remember Terry Scheid? I do. Or Schiavo, Terry Schiavo in Florida. She had some kind of a heart problem and was in a vegetative state for years, and her husband wanted to end her suffering. She didn't want to live like this. Her parents were praying for a miracle, and it went to the Supreme Court, this fight between these families. And I knew I didn't want that. Now, nobody can contest my wishes because after my mother died, I no longer have anybody. It's just me and my husband. My husband is my automatic next of kin no matter what. But I do have a power of attorney, and I have 2 designees. I have one, which of course is my husband. But if my husband predeceases me, say God forbid, we're in a car accident, and he's dead, and I'm on life support, well, my other designated power of attorney can come into the hospital and say, this is what she wanted. This is what's going to happen. She didn't want to live like this. Pull the plug. Or what, anything else. That person can act for me. That person can pay bills with my bank account. They would have access to that. Now, when you do a power of attorney, you must designate someone you trust implicitly. Someone who will follow your wishes to the letter. Someone who will not cheat you or your family. Now, again, I don't have any family except for my husband. So this is important. These are important conversations. Stevie's mother has suffered so much that if only Stevie had had a will and a power of attorney, her life would have been so much easier. And as I told you this week, Stevie's mother is not interested in money. But even when she calls the Attorney General in Maryland, where her son died, to ask what's going on with the investigation, it's been like 3 months now, she gets treated rudely. They're rude to her. We told you we would call you. We're still investigating. Now, I'm sorry. That's rude. This is a grieving mother who had to fight tooth and nail to even bury her son. And now these investigators are giving her the runaround. She wants answers. She wants closure, just as I did when my mother was killed. Only last year, talking to a friend of mine who happens to be a veterinarian, and I explained to him what happened when my mom died and what was going on those 4 days it took for them to kill her. He told me what happened. He knew immediately. Now, of course, none of the doctors that treated my mother would ever admit to any of this, because they knew I was gunning for a lawsuit. But this lovely man gave me closure, and that's what Stevie's mother wants. She will never get over her son's death. Never. But not knowing what happened in those last minutes, those last hours of Stevie's life, haunts her, works on her. And she's not a healthy woman in her own right. She has a heart condition. She deserves to know what happened to her baby boy. The boy that was so looking forward to the football game he had tickets for after his death, to the Atlantic City trip he was going to take with his family to celebrate his birthday in October. How in the world did it come to this on September 4th, where it's an alleged self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head in the presence of others? Interesting. We know for a fact that the girlfriend has refused a lie detector test and has changed the story of what happened before Stevie died many times when talking to investigators. We know this for a fact. But we don't know much else. And as I told you before, I have Googled this 10 ways to Sunday. And I can find no public information in any newspaper that even says Stevie died the way he died. It just says he died unexpectedly in the company of his girlfriend, 27 years old. There is no news of the investigation, even though you would think a police report would be public information. It's not. And what I keep trying to tell Stevie's mom when I speak with her is hang tough. Keep pushing, keep calling, but perhaps there are things you don't know that are going on. And there is an investigation. And they don't want to tell you for fear that you could say something to the wrong person and give them a heads up. And I hope nothing I said on this show this week did that. But at the end of the day, a lovely 27-year-old boy is dead. His mother heartbroken. It is the first holidays without him. Very difficult. And I almost want to also apologize to Stevie's mom because I don't know that this show got the attention that I thought it would. And I'm sorry for that. I think it's a couple of things. It might be that either people are getting bored with me or we released this show at the wrong time of the year. But I thought since so many people will be seeing their children, their adult children at this time of year, that what you wanted, which was to educate people, to let them know what happens in these situations when a young person dies unexpectedly, what nightmares the family goes through. I thought this would be a chance for people to talk, even though it's uncomfortable to discuss. You know, your children never stop being your children. I don't have any children, but I have talked to enough people who have lost their children to understand that. No matter how old they are, they're still your babies. When they're in trouble, you know it, and you'll do anything you can to help, to fix it, to make it right. And when they pass, the way Stevie passed, there's nothing that Stevie's mom can do to make it right now. What she can do is fight to make sure that Stevie isn't forgotten, that his case isn't forgotten, that his case isn't just closed when there are still so many unanswered questions about the way he died. That last text, don't bother come getting him, he's dead. That haunts me. Imagine how his mother feels, knowing that that was the last text sent on Stevie's phone. And because of the investigation, she can't even get that phone. She has had to spend a lot of her own money in order to get her legal rights as Stevie's next of kin, to fight for Stevie. She is also trying to get a law passed in Stevie's name here in Pennsylvania. And she's not quite sure how to do a petition. She needs 5,000 signatures to name this bill after Stevie. It's a bill that would allow parents of adult children to have more rights, to be able to get more information, despite HIPAA, about what's going on with their children's health, what medications their children are being prescribed. It's an important bill, and it's already getting ready to be signed into law by Tom Wolf. But she wants to name it Stevie's Law, and I think that would be nice. So if any of you out there know how to get a petition going, can you please let me know so I can let her know? And we're going to continue to follow this story. I'm going to keep in touch. I think most of you know by now that I actually know Stevie's mom personally. And while she didn't want her name mentioned on the show, she knows I love her. And she knows that I'm not going to forget about her, and I'm not going to forget about Stevie. I don't forget about anybody whose stories I have told on this show. So this is the conclusion of my show on the day Stevie died. And if I get more information, I will certainly keep all of you updated. And I hope you will share this story and take the lessons that should be learned from it. Unfortunately, we have learned through the past few years that children are never too young to die. We don't like to think about it, and we don't like to prepare for it. We think somehow if we prepare for it, it's going to make it happen. That's not true. That's not true. My mother prepaid her funeral 15 years before she died. She put me as a beneficiary on her bank account 6 years before she died. Nothing happened. She didn't drop dead the next day. My mother always had a will after she had me. But I'm telling you this, you don't need to have kids to make a will. Everyone should have a will. Not only to protect your own wishes for how you want things to go after you pass, but to protect your family members from this mother's nightmare. The nightmare that started the day Stevie died. Political Paula, out.